I mean, for people who may not be familiar with Air America or who are only familiar with it through the movie, right, with
Right,
Robert
Mel
Downey
Gibson.
Jr. and Mel Gibson, give us a clearer sense of what what Air America was and why it was important in Southeast Asia.
Air America, of course, had its legs back into mainland China when General Claire Chennault uh, left the military after World War II, and he remained in China and developed an airline there called CNAC. But as the communists began to take over the country, he got chased out to Formosa, which is now called Taiwan, and established a base there. Now, due to his military background and contacts, the Central Intelligence Agency, who was just being born from the OSS, got interested in having a presence over there. So they tasked him with several covert operations, and these were just one-shot deal type things. But in 1952, the looming communist uh, influence in Far East was really ramping up with the advent of the Korean War and the war between the communist North and the South. They wanted more over there. So they bought Air America. Actually, they bought a conglomerate of companies. Air America was only one of the facets. Civil Air Transport was a flag carrier for Formosa, or the Republic of China, as they called themselves, and it had the flag on the tail of the airplane. And also, they invested in a thing called Southern Air Transport Pacific Division out of Japan, which was flying uh, stars and stripes and troops throughout the Far East. And of course, Air America began its journey up the ladder. As far as income goes, a maintenance base was established in Tainan, the southern part of Formosa or Taiwan, and it employed 9,000 people repairing Air Force airplanes and, of course, the ones that we had. Now, the ones that we had were not American registry. They were Chinese registry or Laotian registry. So that all of these airplanes, if they were found in a country or a place they weren't supposed to be, the agency had plausible deniability, which
Hmm.
is a wonderful term that could put you in a lot of trouble at times.
Yeah. Now, when you say the CIA, formerly the OSS, right, became the CIA, and then they bought this conglomerate of airlines
Right,
because they wanted a larger presence because the Chinese communist influence
right.
was growing. What was it simply like intelligence gathering? Like why did they want this fleet of airplanes?
They needed that to resupply the uh, troops who were anti-communist,
Got it.
which South Vietnam, the Laotian government, there was communist Laotians, and there was also pro-democratic Laotians.
Hmm. And one more,
Everybody had a piece of action.
yeah. Yeah, it was like the cantina scene in Star Wars, right?
That's
Everybody's there.
right.
So
Exactly.
so you mentioned that the United States was not supposed to have a presence there. Can you talk a little bit? Can you clarify that a little more?
Yes, they didn't want to be caught encroaching into the communist arena or airdropping supplies or agents into China.
Mhm.
So they had this thing where you had Chinese registered airplanes and Laotian registered airplanes. It wasn't an American airplane. They had plausible deniability if it
Mhm.
was crashed or found somewhere other than where it's supposed to be. One of the earliest one was in 1947. The Civil Air Transport was tasked with airdropping two agents into China, and this whole cover had been blown, and they didn't know it. So when the DC-3 arrived over the spot they were going to drop these agents into, they got fired upon and the airplane got shot down and Snotty, the pilot, was killed. However, the two agents, Downey and Fechtow, they were captured by the Chinese and they spent 20 years in a Chinese prison until Nixon went to China and admitted they were Americans and they simply let them go. It's kind of a face-saving thing,
Hmm.
which is a little convoluted in the way we think.
20 years in a Chinese prison.
That's right.
Wow. So, as things started to heat up in Vietnam, how did the role of Air America and those sister airlines change in Southeast Asia?
It changed in many ways. During the French occupation of Vietnam and their uh, fire bases that was being shelled by the Viet Minh, as they called themselves at that time, from the hillsides, the French did not have any cargo aircraft to do airdrops to resupply their fire bases. So they got our guys to fly C-119s with French registration on them to airdrop to these fire bases. And George McGovern and Wallace Buford got shot down on one of those missions and crashed in across the border into Laos. French loadmaster in the back did survive the crash, and he ended up retiring from the military in Paris as a full colonel.
Hmm.
And the remains of that, there was a documentary done where the people went into the crash site, but DNA was not a thing back in those days, and they were not able to identify any of the casualties there, but they found pieces of the airplane that had not been turned into pots and pans and things like that by the villagers.
Hmm.
And they uh, identified the site. But to get the full picture there of how the Frenchmen survived, and there was one other local Vietnamese loadmaster on board that survived. What happened there? I understand he died from his injuries in that crash.
So you're
But a
saying that
lot of
you're saying that Air America was involved there really before any American advisors or troops. I mean, you guys were really there before.
Yes,
When you
it
say
was first.
when you say first in, last out,
That's exactly right.
it's literal.
Mhm.
So we were there supporting the French.
That's right.
Okay.
Uh, for some strange reason, if we would, yeah, Ho Chi Minh really wanted American support. And if the U.S. would have thrown in with him, none of this would have come to pass. But no, we're going to support the French, which I didn't think that was a wise move myself, but that's politics. And you can't argue with the people that are shuffling the papers in D.C. that are not there. They're going to do whatever they think is the right thing to do.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. So let's switch over to you because I think I'd like to talk a little bit about just your history with aviation. First of all, where did you grow up, Neil?
I grew up in northern Michigan, a little town called Interlaken.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Back then, we had no electricity. We had no central heat or bathrooms inside the house. In the wintertime, you had to slog through a path to the outhouse. And usually from September till May, you wore the same clothes because there was no showers or hot water, running hot water or anything. The only thing you had as far as hot water was water back on a wood stove. And we cooked on a wood stove. No radio, and of course, no electricity. So we didn't really know what the rest of the outside world was doing. Uh, we'd get magazines that were discarded by tourists in the campsites, and that was my main reading material. Other than the one-room schoolhouse that I'd walk from the our house about a mile and a half to the school, and it had no electricity nor inside plumbing. You had outhouses, and I'm quite sure the odor in there was pretty rank because we all didn't smell very good
Mm.
after being bathless for months. But you got used to that. But in 1950s, uh, my mother remarried and we moved to Detroit, Michigan. And luckily, I was in the school district for Grosse Pointe High, which was one of the premier schools in Michigan. And it was also within bicycle riding distance to Detroit City Airport.
And Neil,
And
how old were you when you moved to Detroit?
I was 13.
Okay.
I was 13 and I could ride out to Detroit City Airport. And World War II GI Bill was in full swing back then. And there was a lot of little flight schools there with J3 Cubs teaching guys to fly on the government payroll.
Mm.
And those airplanes required cleaning and washing, and I could do three of those an hour at $5 a piece. This was big cash money. No checks, no deposit in an account. And that fueled my desire to learn how to fly.
Hmm.
Uh, Dual instruction back then was only $14 an hour in an airplane, which that has escalated astronomically in the since then. But I ended up soloing and kept saving my money and washing airplanes and developed a bank account of $1,300, which I used to buy a Cessna 140 up in Cadillac, Michigan.
How old
With
were
it,
you when you bought that Cessna?
I was 17.
17 years old, you bought a plane.
That's right.
And you're a long way from the outhouse now, right? I mean,
That's right. Indoor plumbing, all the rest of that good stuff.
you're getting a great education, you're living in a major city. You're
That's right.
17 years old, you own an airplane.
Mhm.
Um, can you talk I'm just curious about what that transition was like for you. I mean, going from living in the woods and not having any electricity or running water to living
That's right.
in Detroit and getting a great education, owning an airplane at 17. It must have been You must have learned a lot about yourself and your ability to adapt.
Yes, I did. Aviation was in my blood. I just had been doing balsa wood models and things like that prior to actually touching a real live airplane. And it had me enamored totally, and I was hooked. I had a commercial pilot's license before I had a driver's license. The only ground transportation I had was girlfriends that had cars, and that was wonderful.
Sure. Right. Right.
But it was an idyllic life in many, many ways. Uh,
Was your father in the military? I
no,
mean, when you say you had aviation in your blood, what do you mean by that?
I just liked the pictures of airplanes and the thought of escaping gravity's force and flying like the birds. And my father came from Denmark. He was an illegal immigrant. And he eventually got citizenship during World War II because he developed the casing for the JATO bottle. And the government was going to give him an award. And they discovered he was not a legal resident, but so they gave him citizenship. And he had a great life and uh, developed a heat treat industry in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and had two of the largest furnaces in America. Even Volkswagen after World War II sent dies to him to be heat treated, and he'd send them back to Germany.
And is this your stepdad we're talking about?
No, my dad.
Your dad. Okay, but you said your mother remarried. So did your dad pass away at some point?
No, no, no. He lived to 98 years old.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
But
So you're
my
saying you're
grandfather also made it to the century mark.
Wow. Yeah. Well, they say that stuff, longevity and heart health is all it's all genetic, right? That's what I'm hearing lately, right?
Yeah, I remember as a child up there in northern Michigan, they had nutritionalists come by the school and criticize the way we eat with canned meats and smoked meats and things like that. Pancakes were, of course, a big no-no on their list. But we didn't have a supermarket nearby where we could buy fresh produce or anything like that. And I think it was good for us. My grandfather rarely ever saw a doctor in his entire life of 100 years, and worked up until his latter 90s for
Mm,
a living,
mm.
on a dole of any kind. And I think that was a good thing. And I think it kept him alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to that, when if you don't catch it or grow it,
Hmm.
you don't get to eat it. I don't know.
That's right.
I think that
Yeah,
somehow
fish out of
it
the
makes
lake in the
people more
wintertime.
connect. Sorry, it makes people more connected, I think,
That's right.
to the
We
environment.
ate things that people today would kind of thumb their nose at,
Mm.
such as uh, uh, muskrat. That was really good meat, and that was fresh off the trap line. And of course, fish out of the lake. And one of the great prizes I found in the fish in early spring was the roe that was on them, and that was very tasty. Dip it in an egg batter and fry it, and boy, that was delicious for breakfast. But the smoked meats, I think they're claiming they have all kinds of carcinogens in it, but I don't know, they tasted awful good.
Well,
And
and you
as
had to have a
far
way to preserve things, right? Like,
That's right.
yeah.
And of course, for insect control, we had DDT in a pump spray can that you'd spray around the kitchen. You know,
What?
today OSHA would be up your kazoo over that.
Wow. All right, so let's go back to aviation. So you're 17. You've just bought your first plane, a Cessna, you said. Uh, how do you help me understand the path, the career path from 17-year-old commercial pilot to Air
Mhm.
America?
It was a long, arduous journey. Encompassed quite a few years of charter flying and things like that. And even one of the big cargo haulers out of Detroit, Zantop Air Transport, which had automotive contracts where you'd fly parts to their various sub-assembly plants or pick up seat cushions down in St. Louis and fly them up to the assembly line in Detroit. And they also had what they call log air flights, which were military contracts. Uh, Prior to getting all of this good stuff, Zantop had a terrible safety record. It would make you shudder at what was happening. They had 60 C-46s out at the old Detroit Metro Airport, and flying cargo all over the nation. Now, to get extra money and for the company and the rest of that, you'd go out well over gross weight with the extra invoices and things in your shirt, so that if you did get stopped by the FAA, they would be able to see that you were legal, supposedly, without getting out a scale and weighing all the stuff in the back. Uh, and these accidents, of course, brought a lot of heat on them. But then one of the large political figures was coerced into joining our staff. I mean, he was just a name and figurehead, but he also enjoyed some of the profits that we made. So, for some strange reason, all of these FAA violations just disappeared, which, surprise, surprise. But uh, it was dangerous in some cases, and uh, taking off out of Detroit for with a load of auto parts for the assembly line down in Fort Worth. Yeah, 16,000 pounds, full of gas, nonstop. we wouldn't be close to gross weight until we passed St. Louis. And if you would have lost an engine, it would be simply trying to find a place to put the damn thing. And these things were great. And in the log air trips, to me, even today, it kind of amazes me. Go into Savannah, Georgia, and pick up warheads for the silos up in the Dakotas and fly these warheads that had big placards on the cans. Do not remain within 100 feet of this for more than 30 minutes. Well, we're going to be there all damn day with 6 of those things in the back of the airplane and deliver them up there in Lincoln, Nebraska, or up in the Dakotas. And they trucked them all off. And, and if we would have had an evil bone in our body, we had 6, 10 megaton warheads on board. Hey, you could sell those to somebody, but nobody did. And of course, your last trip, when you stopped and offloaded at a military base, you'd fill that thing to the gunnels with the free fuel from the Air Force and then take it back to Detroit. And that extra gas in the tanks would be used to fly auto parts. And they'd make more money that way.
Got it.
But every fall, when the model change of the uh, industry was coming about, they'd furlough us. And uh, I got furloughed in the first year and was out to old Detroit City Airport in a coffee shop. And Don McLeod, who was flying for the Teamsters Union, asked me, well, would you like to fly our Conrad 9800 for the Teamsters? And I said, sure. And I did.
And how old are you at this point?
I was 23 and began flying that thing. And Jimmy Hoffa was on trial in Chattanooga for jury tampering. And as that thing progressed, it became obvious that he was going to go on a federal vacation. Uh, but it was also an education in how our Justice Department works. Every time I'd leave the hotel, there'd be a guy in a trench coat following me and turn around and say, hey, are you FBI? And oh no, and he'd turn around and walk away. And another trench coat would follow, start following you. And even the house up in Detroit, middle of winter, 25 below zero. And you look out front and there's a car idling across the street. And finally go out and knock on his window. Would I come in for a cup of coffee? Oh, no, I'm waiting for somebody. And he'd smoke off and another car would come in, just trying to watch what I'm doing. And of course, I would harass them too.
And they were
But
interested in you because you flew for the Teamsters.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
And we didn't file flight plans if we didn't have to. Or if we did file a flight plan, we'd file it to a little podunk airport where we hoped there was no telephone or any place for them to get inside and wait. And, so they then change your destination and route and go to where you wanted to go. And I'd call and check the weather in Mexico City constantly. And you knew that they'd get excited about that.
So you're not only getting valuable cockpit experience,
Oh,
you're
yes.
getting valuable kind of covert experience as well.
That's exactly right. And I think that's what made me attractive to the agency.
Mm. And when did they come knocking?
They came knocking when I found out that Jimmy was going to go on a federal vacation. And I was in our Washington office, which is the only non-government building on Capitol Square. And I could look right down into Bobby Kennedy's office from the second floor. But there was an ad in the Washington Post for pilots in the Far East. And I answered that ad.
I'll bet
And
you did. That sounded pretty good to you, I bet.
yeah, I'm getting the hell out of Dodge and out of the field of fire,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, plus you just seem to have an appetite for adventure,
Yes, you did back in
exotic.
those days. Aviation was in its infancy.
Hmm.
Uh, Now you've got radar everywhere. Back then, there was no radar except uh, a few places around Atlanta. New York, as you know, did not have much of anything because they had that midair with a TWA Constellation and a United Jet over Brooklyn. And you gave them positions based on what you thought you were. And it had to make estimates for each checkpoint. If you're over 3 minutes off, you had to call them and let them know that you're going to be late or early. And this was really a crude way of air traffic control, but it did work. There was mid-airs, one over the Grand Canyon. There's several instances of people coming together rather violently.
Hmm. So you saw this ad and you said the Washington Post?
Yes. And I answered that, and nothing happened. A couple of weeks later, I was back in DC. So I called this office that I'd sent the application to on K Street, and an H. Dawson answered the phone. And I said, "Did you get my application?" "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what's the disposition going to be?" He said, "We're not hiring right now." Okay. I figured this is a dead horse. So 3 days later, I was in Meigs Field in downtown Chicago, which is no more, waiting for attorneys to come down to fly back to Detroit. And got a call to come to the airport manager's office. And I figured they're just going to tell me that they're late. But no, it was this H. Dawson. And he was all jovial on the phone. I thought, wow. And he says, "You still interested in flying for us?"
How in the world
I,
did he find you? How did he find you at
That's
that?
the other question. How did he know I was there? That didn't make any sense either.
Wow.
But I told him yes. And he said, "I got two questions for you. Can you fly good?" And the devil in me was tempted to say, "Yeah, the wreckage is still burning, but everybody lived." But I didn't. And he says, "One other question. Do you drink a lot?" And I thought, well, maybe this is a requirement. But I said, "No, sir." And he says, "Can you be ready to go in 10 days?" I said, "Go where?" He says, "You're hired." And I said, "No, I need 2 weeks because I want to give the employer proper notice to get a replacement." And he said, "Okay." And I went back to flying for the Teamsters. And he said, "Go down to Detroit and city passport office and get a passport and send it to me so I can get your visas." Well, I did that when I got back to Detroit and filled out all their stuff and brought my little photos in for it. And uh, I said, "When will I get this for me? I got to send it in for my visas." And they said, "Oh, it'll be 30 to 45 days." I said, "Well, I'm supposed to go to work overseas in less than 2 weeks now." And they said, "Who you working for?" I said, "Air America." I had the passport in 3 days. And that kind of told me something funny is going on in the back room.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this guy tracks you down at this, obscure place in Chicago,
That's right.
and now you're getting your passport turned around in record time. Like, what
That's
are you
right.
like, what's going through your mind at this point? What do you think in this job is going to be?
Well, I'd run across a guy that claimed he'd been over there for this outfit, and he told some pretty tall tales out at the airport. And I thought, well, maybe I better check with him. So I called his house. He was living with his mother, and she came on the phone. She says, "Sorry, but he's committed suicide." Whoa, this is getting a little heavy. And on one of the last trips I had with the union, one of the attorneys came up to the cockpit while the co-pilot's serving drinks, and uh, he said, "I hear you're leaving us." And I says, "Yeah, I'm going with an outfit called Air America." And he laughed and he says, "Oh, yeah. That's the CIA. And of course, that gives you visions of the newly emerged 007 books and Terry and Pirate comic strip that's no more. And the reality is far, far from that comic book scenario.
But this was the first that you had heard of any affiliation between Air America and the
That's right.
CIA, right? When you applied for the job, when you got the call in Chicago and learned that you had gotten the job, you had no idea that this was a
No,
CIA,
I didn't.
right?
But I did find out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I did a little research from that point on and found that the Pacific Holding Corporation, which was a Delaware corporation, owned this whole outfit. And it was a conglomerate of companies, Civil Air Transport, Chinese flag carrier, Air America, Air Asia, uh, Southern Air Transport Pacific Division, and Arizona Helicopters were all owned by this Pacific Front that was owned by the agency. And this gave me a little insight of what the hell's going on in the back room. So I knew a lot more than some of the guys that hired on later. Nobody ever said that you were being employed by the agency, but your paycheck was deposited in a Bank of America in LA, and that's where your paycheck went to, and you could draw it from there. This is back in the days, long before credit cards and everything else. Everything pretty much from that point on was cash.
Mm.
And then I got the tickets in the mail, and they were first class, Northwest Orient, as far as Tokyo, Japan, and then tickets on Civil Air Transport, the Cat Jet, out of Tokyo to Taipei. And first class, I'd never ridden first class before, but that was really kind of a kick in the butt. It was pretty nice. You had more stews and passengers up front.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one other fella on board also going over there to work for Air America, and also another fellow that kind of stood away from us. He was in another seat, and he was going to be one of the load masters, or as we called, kickers, that shoved the cargo or controlled the cargo in the back of the airplane. But it first class was really great, and stewardess finally got tired of bringing us a scotch, so she just gave us the bottle. And got to Tokyo in a kind of a blurry haze
It's a
and down.
long flight, but
Yeah, it
especially
is.
during,
It
yeah.
really is. Well, we had a fuel stop in Anchorage, Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
and this was just after the big quake up there, and the whole place was in shambles. The tower was destroyed and leaning over, and just filled it with motion lotion, as they called the jet fuel back in those days, and off to Tokyo, Japan.
Mm. And how long were you in Tokyo before you continued on?
Overnight. And the
Overnight.
next day, back out to the field. And this was the days before jetways and things like that. And you walked across a ramp and up a boarding ladder to the airplane. Now, the Cat jet was so spectacular. It had been polished to a mirror finish, and a large dragon, five-toed dragon on the side of the airplane, and of course, the Republic of China flag on the tail. This was impressive. And the stewardesses, China dolls. And they had a boarding uniform, they had a serving uniform, and they had a departure uniform that they go through before you got off the airplane.
So there were
And
costume changes among the flight
yeah, there was
attendants.
costume changes 3 times.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then Taipei, that is another adventure into the Far East. We were staying in a hotel called a First Hotel. Chinese is called a T.E. Fontaine. And it was an inspired box. And I got a room upstairs on the inside corridor of the hotel. And I got in the room and jumped on the bed. And I learned one thing: mattresses are almost non-existent in that particular hotel, and about broke my tooth slamming into the hard surface of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing was there was a frosted window with light. And I thought, it's night here. Why is there light in my window? And it was light from the hall. I had an inside room that you had a view of the hall. Well, you didn't have a view, but you had that light coming in from the hall.
Mm-hmm.
But matriculation into the system went downtown to the CAT offices and got to meet the chief pilot, Don Teeters, and Boyd, who was one of the vice presidents. But everybody else was Chinese,
So I'm
including
I'm
the
I'm I'm
medical staff.
I'm curious, Neil. By now you figured out that, or at least you have some sort of strong suspicion that this is a CIA owned airline that you're going to work
That's right.
for.
I knew that.
Um, I mean, do you have, well, how much of an idea do you have about what you're doing there? Like what your job's going to be?
Didn't really know, other than the vague allusions to operating in a war zone and your pay scale that we were told. Initially, everybody was hired as a co-pilot or a first officer. It's $750 a month. We weren't getting rich on this, but it was all tax-free, which is a good thing. Uh, and if you made captain, you got 1,050 a month. And one other thing that was in the thing was if you're getting shot at as a co-pilot, you get $5 an hour extra. Or if you're a captain, you get $10 an hour extra for the same bullet. And this was quite a disparity, really. And of course, different stations had different housing allowances that they'd give you to help with the uh, bed and breakfast type thing.
Mhm.
But uh, this was illuminating. And the other thing that was illuminating, we also all had to take a physical and ground school to get a Chinese license. The physical was from actually Chiang Kai-shek's son-in-law, and he headed the medical department, and all our medical department was Chinese. We had no American doctors or flight surgeons at all. And you got your Chinese physical out of the way, which was rather entailed, including a glucose tolerance test, which nobody else does that anymore, I don't think.
Mhm.
But then you went to Chinese ground school, so you get a Chinese license. Now, some of the guys that were there with me poo-pooed at this idea, but I kind of figured, that's not the thing to poo-poo about. Look where the hell you are. You're in the Republic of China, so better pay attention.
Mhm.
And I had one young lady behind the desk at the hotel that coached me in the proper procedures to go about. And that was to show respect. Because as a round eye American, I have no face. So I have to show respect for their system and to take the test when you were given it in their office with both hands, which shows it's important. Sit right in front of them. Don't hide in the back of the room and hand it back in with both hands and be as neat as possible. And I did that. Uh, we were told not to take the airline transport written because nobody had passed it for the last 2 years. Take the one for senior commercial license, and you have a good chance of passing that. I didn't. I put in for the airline transport, and
The one that nobody had passed.
that's right, and I passed it.
And what do
But
you attribute that to? Was it just,
I think
your
Lena's
cultural
coaching
sensitivity?
as far as showing respect and uh, things like that, little tiny things.
Mhm.
Um, Also, don't poo-poo about Chinese history on the test. Dr. Sun Yat-sen was a very big person in their history, and pay attention. And I did, and it worked.
Mm.
But rather than go down to Southeast Asia, they turned around and sent me up to Tokyo, Japan to fly DC-6s out of there.
And what year is this, Neil?
Part
What year is this?
64.
64. All right. So you're in Tokyo in 64.
And got up there and checked out in C4 DC-6 and began flying trips for them. And it was a mixed bag, cargo and passengers, military passengers out of Tachikawa, which was a military base. It had been an old Japanese base during World War II. And the nice part was I got to stay in the old Japanese officers' quarters, which was a two-bedroom apartment with a Japanese tub, which was great.
And what's a
And
Japanese tub? Sorry, I don't
it's
I
a
don't know what
deep
that means.
tub which got super hot water, and you can soak in that whole thing. And it's about 3 feet deep and about a 6 foot square,
Okay.
which was really nice.
Hmm.
And how they could afford all that hot water, I don't know. But it was very enjoyable. And uh, right next door to this place was the Civilian Club. And that was also a wonderful spot to hang out. It cost you $6 a month for the dues, but you also got a free steak dinner every month. So it actually ended up almost paying you to be a member. And drinks uh, during normal bar hours, 25 cents. Happy hour, they're half price. You could drink yourself into a coma doing that with $1.
Right. Good grief.
But started flying routes there. Our route out of Tachikawa, Japan was down to Okinawa, Okinawa to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, from there to Bangkok and Saigon and all the way back, stopping in Taipei and every place that the U.S. military had little bases. But on occasion, in Okinawa, they take the airplane and pull it over to the side of the field, strip off all the markings. So there was no identifying markings as far as what nationality it was or anything else. It was a bare aluminum airplane, which kind of stands out as being a little different. And you come out at 2 o'clock in the morning, leave all your identification in operations, and climb on board this thing fully fueled, and no flight plan, fly out 10 hours into Southeast Asia with a load of high explosives. Offload it and turn around, come back the same way, maintaining radio silence the whole way. And fly 500 feet off normal airline altitudes. So you didn't make a big bang somewhere in the sky. And you get back, they take it back over to the other side of the airport, paint everything back on it, and you get your ID back and back on the line. But since I'd passed this Chinese airline transport rating test, the written, I began bugging Taipei, Don Teeters, the chief pilot, that, hey, I want to go to Southeast Asia. And they finally relented and sent me to Saigon.
And may I ask why? I mean, it sounds like things were pretty good in Tokyo. Why did you want to
Yeah,
make
it
that?
was, but I just wanted to, I'm kind of a adrenaline junkie, and I just enjoyed that sort of thing, and I figured I could be better at that down there.
You had
Plus,
some idea that the action was different.
oh yes, I did, and of course I found out to my glee that it was, and of course in some cases that there was heartbreaking events,
Mhm.
but I wanted to be down where the real war was.
Gotcha. And so when did you make that change? What year?
I did that the first part of 1965.
Okay.
And sent me down to Saigon via getting into Taipei, down to Tainan, which is a huge maintenance base there. And there was a Twin Beach C-45 going to be returning to Saigon after maintenance there. And I was in the right seat and Guy flying was in the left, and we took off out of there nonstop to Taipei, or not Taipei, but to Da Nang. And I found out not too long after we got airborne, this guy had a tiny bladder because he had a bottle there that he'd pee in and then slide the window open on the left side and hold the bottle outside. Well, of course, when that happens, a certain amount is going to blow back on your hand. And of course, it anoints the side of the airplane with urine. And when we got into Da Nang and the mechanics or the ramp crew didn't want to open the cabin door because it's streaked with urine. And we had to open it from the inside. And from there down to Saigon. Uh, and once got into Saigon, stayed in a little hotel downtown. And within 3 days, I was turned loose on the line as a captain. Uh, at that time, we had 10 airplanes and 10 pilots. So the checkout time was very rapid. But this is 65, the beginning of the buildup. And the buildup is going to go on horrendously fast. We did not live in barracks or anything else. We had to live with the locals. And most of the time, we did not have any PX privileges. So we ate off the local economy.
Mm-hmm.
Due to that, you find some interesting ways of walking as your lower intestine is spasming.
Oh, got it. Yeah, you got to get used to the.
You got to get used to the vermin that's in the food. And
Mm-hmm.
we did. And uh, everybody's going to have a case of diarrhea there. That's beyond a doubt. But the food is good. It wasn't killing the locals, so it's not going to kill me. And it wasn't a hell of a lot different than stuff I ate as a kid up in northern Michigan, as
Yeah.
far as the way it's prepared or anything else.
Do you get the feeling, Neil, that everything in your life has prepared you for this moment, right? You've eaten muskrat, you've flown under covert conditions.
Right?
I mean, you're it's like the universe is preparing you for
That's right. I
Air
was ready.
America.
I was ready. There was a lot of new hires that came in that were totally unready for it.
Yeah.
Uh, we even had some that got off the airplane in Saigon. They heard gunfire in the distance, and they got right back on the airplane and left, which was
Mm,
probably a good thing. They probably saved their own life. You
hmm.
know, if they can't handle it, unusual. And I exposed everybody that I was involved with when I was a flight instructing and an assistant manager of flying to the unusual because the unusual is right here. And
Right.
if you can't cope with it, we got a problem. I'm going to send you home.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting part of your book, the Marquis de Sade school of flying, right? Which is, but it's for a reason, right? You're not just a mean
that's right.
guy. You have some
No,
idea, and what's interesting to me is, was this just instinct? You just knew that that was the sort of thing people were going to have to be used to, or had you flown some missions in Southeast Asia and learned it by experience?
I had flown a little bit by myself, of course, when they checked me out as a captain. There was no orientation flights other than you get in there and you go where the USAID customer or the agency guy tells you where to go. You had a regular schedule, and you'd fly to all of these strips. And yeah, it was a learning process from the get-go. But I knew how to fly in and out of dirt strips and things like that. And I knew how to fly the airplane and take it to its limits and beyond.
Hmm.
The airplane will do a lot more than what's in the manual. It will perform much better than what you think it can. And you got to have a feel for these things. And to me, an airplane was an extension of the body. And as we got slow and it was starting to get close to a stall speed, which means we were running out of airspeed, you could feel it shudder. And in steep turns and things like that, you could hear the moan of the airplane and feel it uh, responding to you.
Hmm.
And if you could take it well beyond what the manufacturer was intending it to do, and we did. Our strips were not what they call balanced field. Uh, Balanced field means that you can uh, put full power to it, accelerate down the runway, and get off the ground and get enough speed to where if an engine fails, you do have control left in it. But that is what the FAA wants to see you do. And then if it does fail, you can feather that engine and still fly it. Well, our strips were not that long. Uh, I've based our field lengths on how long it took to get the damn thing off the ground. It doesn't mean you're at a safe speed. No, but you're off the ground and you're flying. Now, the one big thing that a lot of guys do in civilian aviation, and it's wrong, they reduce the power the minute they come off the ground. Well, engines, whether it's in a car or airplane or anything, that's when they fail. The balance changes in that engine and leave it alone. It's designed to fly or run full power for hours on a test stand. That doesn't mean you can't do the same damn thing in the airplane. Wait till you got a good idea of what you can do with this damn thing if the engine quits when you change the power setting. Have a spot picked out or anything else. But don't fool with it when you're getting trying to save gas or anything like that. That doesn't make any sense. All you're going to do is end up losing your life.
Yeah.
And I beat that into people's minds with
Yeah.
a heavy hand.
So it's Saigon, 1965. You're a captain. You're
Instructor pilot.
evaluating, yeah, evaluating and training other pilots. What is your, first of all, remind me how old you would have been in 65?
37, 47, 26. Isn't it?
20,
Yeah.
26. Man, that is just astounding. So what is your uh what's your contact with home at this point? Are you in touch with people back in the States? Do you have siblings or
So phone
girlfriend?
calls were non-existent.
Yeah.
Uh, the military did have a phone system, but letters. And in fact, I just got a whole bunch of that stuff sent to me by my daughter down in Australia. A lot of memorabilia and old pictures and things like that. Uh,
Who are you writing to? Are you writing to your parents, to your
yeah,
siblings?
or wives.
Wives, got it. At 26.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had a young daughter then too.
Okay. Okay. And are you thinking that you're going to be in Southeast Asia for a limited amount of time? Do you have any idea when you'll
No,
be? You're thinking you're going to be there for a while.
that's right. I knew I
Okay.
was going to be there for a while because it was kind of the playground that I liked. It was kind of where I belonged. Uh, some people, the thought of having somebody out there in the dirt shooting at you with bad intent would kind of crater their minds. For me, it didn't. I thought I could outwit all of those guys, and I did for quite a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, you were there, you know, at the very
Until
beginning of the buildup, and then you were the guy who flew the last Air America flight out of Laos or Cambodia, I forget which, in 75.
that's right.
So, I mean, that's you were there the whole time. Basically
That,
the whole time that Air America was really up and running there.
I rode the horse until it died.
Was that unusual? Were there other pilots who were there as long as you were?
Not many. Shower Shoes, Wilson, Randall Richardson, and a few of the others. George Calhoun were there, but they've all passed.
You I mean, this sounds crazy to say, but you must have loved it. Why would you stay for
Oh,
10 years?
yeah, it was adrenaline is my drug of choice, and I'm addicted to it actually. Now that I've got long in the tooth, not so much, but
Yeah.
still, uh, so many guys that are addicted to that go too far. I've got friends that in the racing business and uh, people in the boxing business, and it's there, and you tend to go past your prime. I know my reactions are not anywhere as close to what they were back then, and I'd be just fresh meat then.
Hmm. So, Air America is, I mean, the mission pretty much is to supply people who are fighting the communists
That's right.
outside of the areas where American troops are supposed to be.
Right. There was a lot of little special forces sites around that we resupplied and the rest of that. One of note was up at Nanco, and that was actually in a logging area of Vietnam. And there was elephants they used to skid the logs out of the jungle. The A team that was there was run by a first lieutenant and also a senior master sergeant by the name of Vukovic. Now, his brother was killed in the Indy 500 uh, during his racing career there. But Sergeant Vukovic was a real stand-up guy. And there was people like that around that were just magnificent. A lot of the special forces guys, I had one good friend was a special forces medic. He'd been a Quaker, surprisingly, and he was with an A team and used to hang out with him at the Special Forces bar there in Saigon. Uh, and that was a lot of fun too. We had a tremendous amount of fun, but we were
Well,
all in the
but
same plot.
you said you're addicted to adrenaline. I'm imagining that wasn't all fun. I mean, some of it was.
No, some of it is not fun. Some of it is sad. I lost people. Uh, there in October of 65, they made me assistant manager of flying. So I was in charge of several aircraft programs there, the training and scheduling and everything else of those. And that's where I ended up uh, doing the body bag work and investigating accidents. And accidents are going to happen no matter how good you are. The bad guys are out there trying to ruin your day.
Hmm.
And unless you stay really far ahead of them and have a lot of luck, you're going to get hurt eventually.
Yeah. I mean, normally I talk to guys who were in Vietnam for 12 months or 13 months. Sometimes I talk to guys who've done or women who've done more than one tour. But we're talking about people who spent, anywhere from 1 to 3 years in
Right.
Vietnam. Now I'm talking to a guy who was there for 10 years. I don't even know how to ask this question. Are there any are there any missions that really stand out in your memory as ones that really scratched that adrenaline junkie itch? Any
Uh,
any ones that you can remember where you didn't think you should have come home from?
only one of the last ones when I got shot down in Laos, but we had what they called black flights. Now, a black flight was something that you did and you didn't talk about it to anybody uh, until your secrecy agreement ran out in 1984, which is a long ways in the future. But I had one as an assistant manager flying, and George Calhoun, our chief pilot, he called me into the office and he said, I want you to get a Twin Beach, fully fuel it, file a flight plan to Bangkok. But as you get near to Bangkok, I want you to divert to Tak Lee, Royal Thai Air Force Base. And you're going to have a passenger coming out from the embassy. I don't want you to look at him. He will have an escort. So I want you to take that airplane, put it out on a ramp, climb into the cockpit, and wait. Well, I did. And I waited and waited, and you're looking at a cockpit temperature of over 110 degrees, and your fingernails are almost starting to sweat. But finally, a black embassy car pulled onto the ramp, and whoever it was seen by all of the ramp workers, but they don't want me to see him. And I thought that was a little unusual. But they climbed into the thing, closed the cabin door, and the embassy escort tapped on the cockpit door and crank it up and go. And I did. And everything went fine and flying a regular flight plan and got close to Bangkok and told them I'm diverting to my alternate. And they rogered that, and I headed on up to the north of Bangkok and landed at Tak Lee. Got to the ramp there, and we had our own ramp there. The Blackbird also had a ramp there. And he got off into another curtained vehicle, and off he went. Now, who the hell it was, I have no idea. It could have been Adolf Hitler.
I think it was Jimmy Hoffa, but that's just my, that's why they didn't want you to look at him.
Could be. But refueled, started to taxi back out. And I got off the ramp and on the taxiway, and a Thai Jeep pulled in front of me with a 50 caliber mounted on top, and had me stop and get out of the airplane. And I find whenever in danger or doubt, get really stupid, and that helps an awful lot. And they asked, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going home." And where you're home? Saigon. Why you here? Me lost. And we did that for 3 days, and they finally let me go back. But, supposedly the embassy had this all laid on, but obviously they lied to me. So that was not a good lesson. Don't take everything they say as the gospel truth. They might be putting you into a situation that you can't get out of. So that was a good lesson. And another one out of Saigon, got a call in the middle of the night. I had a radio beside my bed so that they could get a hold of me if there was a schedule change or anything else. But they called at about 10 o'clock at night and after curfew in Saigon and said, "We want you to pick up an American to be a co-pilot for you in a C-46 and get out here. We're sending an escort for you from the embassy and the Vietnamese." And we did, and ruined this guy's night of sleep and got out to operations. And there's one of the spooks from the embassy there, and he gets me aside. Now, why? He doesn't want my co-pilot to hear this because he's going to be sitting right beside me. I had no idea, but I thought it was silly as hell. And he said, "I've got a load of stuff in the C-46 out there, and I want you to take it nonstop to Hong Kong."
To where?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
And don't tell anybody about it. Do not file a flight plan. Maintain radio silence until you get close to Hong Kong. Give them a call and they'll clear you to land. Well, that's going to put me at the edge of my fuel window in that C-46, even with full tanks. And if they won't clear me to land, I'm either going to have to go ahead and bust on in and land and face the music or ditch the damn thing. But got out the airplane, and it's loaded with tear gas grenades and all kinds of crowd control stuff that is illegal as hell in Hong Kong. The British still had that as a crown colony. And okay, took off and got about 50 miles outside of Hong Kong and gave them a call. And they simply cleared me to land. Okay, got in there, and I figured they'd park me off to the side somewhere, but no, they had me parked right in the front of the terminal with the bright lights, and props were spinning down to a stop, and Hong Kong police stake bed truck pulled out from the side of the terminal. I thought, ah, boy, this is not going to be a pretty picture. but opened the cargo door on the side of the airplane, and they said, we had riots here and we need this crowd control stuff.
Mm.
Okay. And simply went home the same way,
Mhm.
not talking to anybody. It was a successful trip.
So you were there for 10 years. I mean, look,
Mhm.
rounding down, right? If you don't count Tokyo, you get to Saigon in 65, you leave in 75. How many days a year are you in the cockpit?
I was in the cockpit probably 25 days out of every month, either
Jeez.
giving check rides or training people or flying the line.
And if you
Uh,
had to guess how many of those days that you're, in the air, uh, across 10 years or in an average year, are you being shot at?
in Vietnam, it was kind of a unique situation. The pay scale in that place was you only got paid for the time the wheels were off the ground. Didn't make any difference how long you sat on a ramp waiting for takeoff. And also, they only paid you hazard pay, that either $5 or the $10 for uh, hazard pay for 10 minutes after you took off and 10 minutes before you landed. They didn't have any missiles there at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, they did.
Mm-hmm.
But the other bad thing is that in Laos, you got paid from day one, full flight. You got your hazard pay. And that made that place much more attractive. So in 1969, I bugged them constantly. I didn't want to be an assistant manager flying. I wanted just to go up to Laos and fly an airplane and have a crew to worry about, and that's all.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to have to babysit all of these guys and
Mm-hmm.
have a radio by my bed that can disturb my sleep at any time of the day or night. Uh, this was where I wanted to be. And that's really where the real conflict was going on. It had been going on for a long, long time. Laos was a neutral country, but everybody was there. All the combatants were there. The Red Chinese were there, the Communist Laotians, the French were still up there, the Russians were there. Anybody in the world that had it in for us had an embassy up there, which made that a real interesting spot. Uh, and they relinquished, and they sent me up to Vientiane, Laos, Sin City on the Mekong, which was wonderful.
And what,
That
how old are you now? You're
I
27, 28.
This was in 69 to
Oh yeah. You're 30.
30.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm ready for the rest of the war. But
You're not
yeah,
getting tired. You're not getting tired of this at all. You're like, turn it up.
no, no, it's good for you. I think adrenaline is probably one of the bottles of youth that you can have. It keeps your mind going. If it's not going, it's going to be dead. You're going to have to keep up uh, with the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back then, of course, we had no TV, we had no telephones, no internet, no nav aids, and that was a bad thing in Vietnam. Uh, we were operating on a VHF frequency. The Army was operating on HF. The Air Force was UHF,
Hmm.
and I don't know what the hell the Navy was working on, but we had no communications between people. So you could be booming along in the murk and not knowing who else is in that cloud. And we had mid-airs. We had one mid-air down in Soc Trang in the Delta where one of our Dorniers was taking off. And the Army was practicing auto rotations with the Hueys out of the same place. Well, they met at about 150 feet. And luckily, they crashed into a bank of a irrigation ditch, and they all lived, with other than minor scrapes and bruises. In fact, the wing from that crash, that Dornier, is on one up here in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Hmm.
A fellow owns it up there, and he's got it in Air America colors, and he's had me autograph the airplane.
How about that? So 1969, you get you're looking to turn the adrenaline pump up a little bit. You go to Laos. How's your day different in Laos than it was in Saigon?
Well, in Laos, it was a stabilized schedule, and you could fly 20 days out of the month and have 10 days off. They have called it scheduled time off, or STO. Uh, and this was great because that allowed you to go ahead and have little adventures. Go up to Taipei, or go to Hong Kong for 10 days, go down to Malaysia for 10 days. And I even went down to New Zealand and also to India and did a tiger hunt. And this time off gave you a time to empty your stress bottle and become somewhat human again. Uh, because the playpens in Laos were wild, to say the least. There was places there that were not on the A list of cuisine or anything else. There was a place there that called a White Rose that had exotic entertainment, to be kind.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one lady in there that I really felt sorry for, because she was uh, a mute. I wouldn't call them deaf and dumb. She was far from dumb. She was pretty smart, but she couldn't talk except in grunts and things like that. She was trying to talk. And I'd go and talk to her that way and gesture. And she was a good mime. And the rest of the people there thought I could speak her language, which was great. And luckily, that lady ended up marrying somebody from the embassy and is living down in Florida today.
Now, speaking of that, what are your language skills? What are the requirements for you? And what are your abilities?
My abilities are very limited, other than basic phrases and things like that. No good, bomi. Uh, of course, you pick up a little bit from the load masters we had in the back, which were Thai and Lao. And uh, it basically basic stuff. A little Lao, a little Thai, a little uh, Chinese, but just enough to order food and have fun.
Yeah. Now you said that you wanted to go to Laos because in 69, because that's where the real war was happening. And
That's right.
so I'm assuming that that meant more danger for you.
Yes, it was more danger, but there again, you get a chance to exercise your survival skills and pay attention, for God's sakes. I was not kind to co-pilots in the 123. The 123 was unusual because we used American co-pilots. The C-46s, we used Lao and Thai co-pilots in those things. But 123 they were called bailment aircraft. In other words, they were given to Air America on loan from the Air Force. There
Mm.
was no Air Force markings on them. They stripped all of that off, and you just had uh, three-number identifiers on it, dating back to the year of manufacture. Most of ours were 1954 and 55 years of manufacture. And it was a great airplane. Initially, uh, it was designed by a doctor and was sold to the American government during World War II. And it was heavy and cumbersome, and didn't have enough power to get back off the ground again. He thought they could land it and bolt engines on it and take it off again. Well, it didn't work. Uh, then Fairchild bought the thing, and they hung two big engines on it. But the one unique thing about the fuselage, it was built in three sections and bolted together. So you could be actually disassembled in three pieces. Uh, but the R2800 99Ws that they hung on were great reciprocating engines, 2,500 horsepower each. This was good, except in short strips, you got a real good look at the trees at the end. And then they finally hung two J-85 jets on the thing. We've now got a racehorse here, and they upped the gross weight to 60,000 pounds. And we could operate that into 2,000 feet because it had anti-lock brakes and full reverse in that thing. And it was exciting, yeah, but coming out, boy, it was a rocket ship. It was great. I love the old bird. And of course, rollers on the floor, ramp in the back that opens up like a C-130. Great airdrop airplane. It was fantastic. And airdropping was my fun. That was what I really, really enjoyed. It was a ballet in the sky. And we dropped everything from rice to munitions, uh, fuel, all sorts of stuff like that.
Can you say
In
more
Laos,
about can you say more about ballet in the sky? Can you be
ballet in the sky was airdropping.
right?
And that you'd slow the airplane down to 120 knots so that the chutes could deploy without ripping apart. And you'd be airdropping for free fall from 800 feet and the others down as low as 400 feet for the parachutes to open. Uh, you'd fly a racetrack pattern. And on final, the back end of the airplane would be opened up. Whatever cargo you wanted to drop would be positioned back against what they called a cut strap, right, keeping it from falling off the ramp. Your nose is up a little bit on this thing at 120 knots. And as you pick a spot that you're aiming for and want to drop, you'd call drop over the intercom. The loadmaster in the back would take his knife and cut that strap, which would allow that pallet to roll out the back of the airplane. With a little help from bringing the jets up to 100%, which had been idling at 60%, and adding more power to the reciprocating engines, the acceleration would cause it to roll right out the back promptly and allow the parachutes to open. And they like bullseye the DZ. But there was accidents on those things. And one I had up in Laos, just below the plane to jars, I was dropping fuel drums and came in, and it was a nice big secure area. And on the first pass, I had an American loadmaster in the back. And normally when you call drop and it goes off the back end of the ramp, they'll call load clear. And no, you can turn then. But this time he said, "Oh my God." And I figured, well, we're getting shot at. So I cranked it over to the left hard. And as I could see what was happening with a load that went off the back of the ramp, three of the parachutes were right in the middle of the DZ. But there was also two parachutes falling down like a bag of rags with nothing underneath them. And there was a bloom of fire from the trenches around the site, which meant those drums had come off and pre-fell down to where they had their noon cooking fires going and burned up some guys. And customer on the ground came on, says, Big Bird, get out of here. You burn us up. And I did. I went back to Vientiane where they'd rigged the load and told them what went on. And felt pretty bad about killing some of our own guys. That's not a good feeling. but exercise more care in checking that load back there. And that was a bad day.
Yeah.
But things like that happened. Uh, Airdropping, of course, has got high risk, not only for you in the front of the airplane, but poor guys in the back of the airplane who've got to reposition a load for the next pass or such as that. And what gunners that are on the ground, they weren't good bird shots, but most of your bullet holes would be in the tail of the airplane. And that's where those poor guys were. And we had one up near Site 32 in northern Laos, letting down into make a drop, and had an American loadmaster in the back, and there was a bang, and I knew what that was. That was a round, and the loadmaster in the back, I said, "You okay back there?" And he's going, "Oh, oh," and I figured, well, he's hit, and had the co-pilot go back and take a look and see what the hell's going on. And he came back to the cockpit laughing. And I thought, well, this is not funny, buddy. And he says, yeah, it is. He says, the round went into the hydraulic tank there by the right wheel well and was spraying hot red hydraulic fluid on his back. And he thought it was blood. He picked up the nickname Bullet after that. But there was funny things that went on and also very serious things. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. All of which are in your book. Um, or at least many of which are in your book. Can we
right.
talk just a little bit about we could come back and talk more about your time in Laos, but for now, can we talk about your last days? I mean, you
Last day in Laos.
yeah.
Okay, the
Yeah, or how
the,
you're
the
feeling and what you're doing and what you're thinking as as the end of April 1975 is approaching. What's going through your head? You've been there 10 years.
That's right. Well, I think you probably want to go to the shoot down, don't you?
Okay.
Okay, that was in December 6th, 1972. And I was tasked with going down to southern Laos and airdropping to two fire bases that were harassing the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This was a very hot area as far as bad guys shooting at you. We lost a caribou down there with the loss of the entire crew, uh, got shot down. And Air America, of course, had helicopters in Laos. We were there and we provided an awful lot of support for the guys coming out of Haiphong and Hanoi that get shot down and have to bail out over Laos. We were there. We were ready to pick them up because the Air Force needed to get permission to cross the fence, as they called it, or the border, because it was a neutral country to do a pickup. So we did most of the pickups. But down there in Pak Se, the southern part of Laos, we had H-34s operating there and also a Loach working there, which is the old Hughes 500 helicopter. But the H-34s were the primary tool that they were using, all on bailment from the military. And with no military markings, just H numbers on them. And I got down there and got briefed, and one of the chopper guys came, caught me before I went out to the airplane, and he says, "Don't believe him." And I've been burned a couple times by agents in the field. They're responsible for the area they've been assigned to, and they're trying to get supplies into their troops that are securing that area. And if it's real hot and dangerous, they're not going to tell you that. They want their cargo in there. So I took that with a grain of salt and went out and airdropped at the first site, no problem at all. And since there was another track left in there for the next site down the way, I opted not to climb out. It was only 15 miles away. just leave the back end open. And I had two tie kickers, Sampop and Buma, and be ready to drop when we get to the next site, and then we're going to go home. And they rogered that. And as I approached the site, it was almost over. The customer on the ground called and said, Big Bird, get out of here, get out of here. AAA, AAA. Well, AAA comes in a lot of different flavors. 12.7, 50 caliber stuff, got green tracers. And they had some quad 50s there, 4-barrel 50 calibers, like a hose. Then you had 23 millimeter. That was an explosive round. And it was white hot when it came out and kind of floating up towards you. And it looks like it's not going to get to you, but then it accelerates as you gets closer and you got a better perspective. And then you have red balls coming up, and that's 37 millimeter or 57 millimeter anti-aircraft rounds, and they're explosive rounds. Well, I didn't see anything, but I brought the jets up and we jigged out of there, and I didn't see anything at all. And I asked Sampop in the back, you guys see anything back there? And he said, yes, Captain. Red balls went by the tail. Well, that's not a happy day. So I went back to Paksay, and the two case officers there, Gray Fox, which had gray hair, and Tall Man, and he was tall and young. And told him what had happened. And they said, oh, there's no big weapons there. And I said, well, how about you go out and talk to my loadmasters and see what they say? And, oh, no, if it makes you happy, we'll have them sweep the area. And I had a bad feeling about that particular term, but waited about a half an hour, and he came back out and he said, oh, there's nothing there. They must have just panicked a little bit. And okay. And we climbed back in it and got on top of a little low cloud deck, and our H-34 choppers were going in and picking up wounded, which told me the bad guys are pretty close. And I listened to them going in and out of the site. And when the last one called clear, I told the guys, hang on in the back. And I took it right down to the jungle canopy. And
You're still trying to drop your second track.
That's right.
Okay.
And asked for the customer on the ground where I'm dropping, keep throwing smoke grenades out in the drop zone. I want a big bubble coming up. And he rogered that, and chasing all the wildlife out of the jungle canopy. And the reason I got down low and fast on that was it's pretty hard to swing a gun barrel, a big gun barrel that fast to lead you enough to get you. And figured I'd outsmarted these guys, and pulled up just short of the strip, getting up to about 400 feet, and they nailed me. And the first thing I did, I lost the ailerons. Those are the things that make the airplane bank right and left. And she started to roll to the left into the jungle. And to stop that, I pulled the power completely off the right side and idled the right jet. And she slowly came back. I'm down to about 90 knots in the top of the trees, and he's shaking like hell. And started making a little altitude. One of the choppers that had been hanging around to see if we got out of it okay said, you're trailing fluid. And I could see by my right fuel gauge, 700-gallon nacelle tank behind the engine, it was going down fast. So that's where the fluid was. It was fuel coming overboard. I didn't worry about it blowing up out there because we had foamed tanks that would prevent fuel vapors from being explosive in the tank. But pulled up out of there, and the loss of control, I had almost full right rudder and no ailerons whatsoever. I could jockey with power as far as turning, and headed for the old Japanese airstrip that was over there about 15 miles away. and figured I'll either put it in the dirt there or have the crew bail out. But with the lack of control and the strip was all overgrown with about 6 foot high elephant grass, I figured it's time to have the guys go for a walk. And uh, lined up on the first pass and told the co-pilot to go in the back. And when I ring the bell, you guys go. And Sam Pop acknowledged it in the back. And I was about ready to ring the bell for them to jump. And Sam Pop came on the intercom. He get away from us. And he came up the ladder into the cockpit and he wanted his survival vest. Well, I let him go down the cockpit ladder to the cabin floor and told Sam Pop in the back, take it away from him and throw it out the door. As if he tries to put it on, his parachute won't open. I probably should have let that happen, but I didn't. And on the next pass, about to ring the bell, and he was back in the cockpit. He wanted his camera. He had a Nikon camera that he valued. And I let him grab that, and he got a cut in his forehead from me punching him. And he fell back down the ladder. And I know he can't hang on to it once he exits the airplane. And he'd never jumped before. So he got back there, and I told the guys, I don't care what you do, get him out. And in the next pass, Booma, he jumped. And when co-pilot looked out to see what was going on, Sam Pop wrapped his arms around and took him out the door. Well, the chopper's called. They got 3 good shoots, and that's fine. I'll be out on the next pass. Keep the meter running. And on the next pass, I did lock the controls and pull the power all the way off the right side so it wouldn't start to roll on me. And went down and exited stage door right, not the same troop door, and fell for a ways watching her. And before I pulled, and I was high speed, so the opening shock was violent, and that's why I'm about 1.5 inches shorter than what I used to be.
Than you used to be. Wow.
But ended up in some low scrub, and kept the D-ring, put that in my back pocket. Heard a chopper coming for me, and he was going to try to land in this little clearing, but I knew it was too small. His tail rotor hit some of the trees and showered me with branches. Now, geez, don't follow me now. And he didn't. He picked back up, dropped the sling, and I rode the sling back up into the cabin.
Mm.
And then the rest of the story kept on rattling on.
Yeah. So can we talk about your final days there in 75? What's going on, or what's going on around you? What's going on in your mind? What sort of work are you doing? Is it different than the work you were doing before?
Yes, it was, because I was no longer with Air America.
Ah,
I was flying a Conrad or a Convair 440, but that developed from one Convair I brought up there. We lost an engine. Then I started flying C-46, Samaki airline. It's worked together is what it meant. And it was an old C-46. And first trip out of Phnom Penh, it shook like hell. And minute I pulled the power back, it smoothed out. Wow. It could have been a tire or something out around. And began flying that out of Kampong Sam, out of a little town on the coast of Cambodia, on the south coast. And flying rice to various destinations and passengers. And on one of the last trips I flew with that particular airplane was into a town to the north west of northeast of Phnom Penh. And it had been a pretty hot zone. So you spiral down over it. And as I let down, there was a bang in the back. And the Chinese co-pilot I had, he says, "Oh, cargo fall over." Hell no, I know what that sound is. But got on the ground. And, it was not a secure site. The village elders had been decapitated by the Khmer Rouge and their heads placed on fence posts around the ramp as a reminder of how bad it was to be not Khmer Rouge and for something for the birds to feast upon. And I saw a bullet hole in the right wing, right about 4 inches from the fuel selector valve, out through the wing spar, out through the top of the wing and through the cabin and wherever else it wanted to go. But when I got down to Kampong Sam, which was pretty secure, I took a slow walk around that and found nothing but that one bullet hole. But when I came up to the left engine, like most pilots, you'll grab the prop blade, and it moved back and forth. The whole blade was loose in the hub. That's where my vibration was coming from. And that meant it wouldn't be too much longer until that blade would leave and take the engine and or wing with it.
Mm.
Well, that got parked. Next, a Convair 440 came open. Anchorwatt Airlines, nice airplane. It was a beauty and started flying the same trips with that,
Wait a minute.
passengers.
So I'm sorry. So you've left Air America at some point, and now you're just flying for various airlines in
That's
Southeast
right.
Asia?
That's right. When
You're
Air
flying for
America
Anchor
left,
Wat?
yeah, Anchorwatt Airlines.
You
When
really did not want to go home.
that's right. That's right. The beat was still going on. And this is from Cambodia. After everything cratered, I went back to Laos. And yeah, a little demented. But this thing was a fine airplane and was over in Battambang, which is over by the Thai border. And another friend of mine was there in the ramp, and he had a Convair with a flat nose wheel tire. And we're standing there, and he was commenting on how yellow I was. Well, I had hepatitis at the time, and I'd lost a lot of weight. I was down to 104 pounds. Uh, it was what looked like a cadaver, but as long as I cinched my seatbelt real tight, I could rotate the airplane and get it off the ground. But I could hear a 50 caliber firing outbound from the perimeter. Well, this is not good. And a Cambodian officer came up to us and said, "You know, all American go home." Really? Well, we're American, we're still here. And he says, "Yes, they come in with helicopters and take your embassy, our generals, and all our politicians and leave." And wow. That's meant that they left all these guys in the field without any leadership or resupply. So they're nothing but fresh meat. Not a good thing to be. I turned to my friend and I said, "I'm going to go back down to Kampong Sam, spend the night, and then tomorrow I'm going to go to Bangkok. How about you join me?" And he says, "Yeah, I've got to go into Phnom Penh and get my wife." And I said, "Well, that's fine, but be there by noon or I'm gone." And he said, "Okay." And I did. I went back down to Kampong Sam and spent the night there. And the next day, out getting breakfast at a little coffee shop they had there in this motel I was staying at on the beach. And there was a Chinese crew there. They had a DC-3 and they were going to Phnom Penh. And I knew the co-pilot and I told him, "Hey, you know, I'd be really careful about that. And if you don't want to fly with him, you can come with me." And his captain overheard him, and both of us, and he says, "No, no, no, he'd fly with me. You long nose, round eye, you in trouble. Me Chinese, they don't shoot me." And I said, "Okay, buddy, that's your problem, not mine." And they took off, went to the airport, and I dawdled around for about half an hour, and I had a Filipino co-pilot. He'd actually never had a pilot's license. He'd had a propeller mechanic's license, but he filled a seat, and I can fly the Convair by myself anyway. So we finally went out to the airport about 10 o'clock, and it's starting to look a little eerie out there. Noodle stands that normally hang around were closing up their shutters and leaving, and the pedicabs were leaving. And this is not normal in an Asian airport. They usually hang around all day. And got the steward and stewardess I had. Stewart was Cambodian. In fact, he's even on the website that I've got, and he's made recontact with me. And his stewardess, she was 14 years old, and but that was our problem, not mine. And I told him what's going to happen, and he borrowed the station manager's Land Rover and went into town to get their stuff. And I said, "Be back here by 12 or we're gone." And he said, yes, he'd do that. And now the ramp is just about empty.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear a roar of an airplane coming from the north over a low ridge of hills. And it was a DC-3. And he bounced down the strip, spun it around, came back up to the ramp and said, we go, Phnom Penh burning, Phnom Penh burning. And I was almost tempted to say, well, what about you Chinese? I didn't. And he got his co-pilot aside, and I says, now you've got a load of Cambodian passengers on board. Do not take them into Don Muang in Bangkok and land there, or you're all going to end up in Huskau. And he said, yeah. I said, go to Sadahib, Thai Air Force Base on the South Coast. They won't know what to do with you, but they're not going to throw you in jail. He acknowledged that, and they took off. And it's really eerie out there. And the station manager there, he had a feeling things were going south. And I told him, how about you come with us today? And he looked down at his shoes and said, no, Captain. My family in Phnom Penh. You can't argue with that. I didn't know the Holocaust that was coming, or I might have forced him on the airplane. We're 1.7 million. We're about to die. But I didn't. And Land Rover came back, looked like he'd qualifying for the Indy 500. And he jumped out. He says, nobody in town, nobody in town. Yeah, I know why. They're out in the boondocks hiding until the Khmer Rouge take over. And loaded them in the bird. It's now 12 o'clock. And the air stair door folded into the side. And I cranked the right engine. Temperatures and pressures coming up. And cranked the left engine. And the station manager always stood up to the left front with a fire bottle. And as I released the brakes, he snapped a salute. I guess he'd seen that in the movies somewhere. And I could see the dusty tear tracks on his cheeks. His world was ending. his job, what is happening to his family, nobody knows. And I never did find out. My friend wasn't on the horizon, and I wheeled her out onto the runway. No point on running it up. I'm going to go. Poured the coal to her and came off Cambodian soil for the last time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want me to continue on going into Bangkok?
Uh, no, I think we have to. I want to talk about your book a little bit. Um, we're technically at time, but I can stay on a little bit longer. I'd like to know a little bit about, when and why you decided to write Flight.
I wanted to chronicle this whole thing, and I wrote it all down in double-spaced manuscript form, and looked into perhaps self-publishing, and I didn't have the money for that.
Okay.
But I'd been a speaker over here at AirVenture in Oshkosh, and the lady in the audience, she'd been a reporter for Chicago Tribune and also had an aviation background, Luan Groskop.
Okay.
And I finished my talk, and she said, "Can I buy you a beer?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm open for that." And uh, we went into a hotel I was staying at and had a beer. And she says, "You need to write all of this down, uh, and maybe it'd be into a book." And I said, "Well, I have. I've got a manuscript, but I can't afford to publish it." And she says, "Can I take a look at it?" And I said, "Yeah, I can mail it to you." And I thought, well, she's just doing this as a courtesy to be kind. And a few days later, she called and said, "We've got to get an agent." And we did. Bob DeForio. He'd handled Stephen King's paperbacks and rest of that. And he signed us up, and he also found a publisher, and we're going off and running.
And what was the process like for you? I mean, to have to recall all of this was, I guess you'd been doing it as a speaker
I've
anyway.
been doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured there's no sense throwing it all away. Just somebody might want to hear this story, and I guess I was right.
Well, I mean, it's a fascinating life. I mean, to think of the amount of ground that you covered is it's kind of astonishing, really. I mean, you said that you grew up basically in the woods, eating whatever you
That's right.
caught or shot or
That's right.
grew. Um, and you were part of something, and this actually is something I wanted to ask you about. You were part of something that made an impact, that left a mark on history. How do you think about Air America and its reason for being, but more importantly, the legacy of it?
Yes, there's a lot of sad things that, of course, ensued after the end of it. Uh, in some ways, we were kind of throwaway people. But I've talked extensively to a congressman here, Michael Grothman, or Glenn Grothman, and he's put a bill into Congress, and this bill has only gone about 3 times and always failed. And I'm kind of hoping that sometime, maybe instead of passing these weird bills, they might try to consider those of us that have sweated and died for
Well,
the
what is the
country.
bill? Can you describe the bill?
Air America Act.
Okay. And the purpose of the Air America Act is?
To get some sort of retirement benefit. None of our names are on the wall. The only place they're visible is at one memorial in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. from that the Hmong built.
Hmm.
Uh, there's nothing anywhere else. And that's only the guys that died in Laos.
So this is about more than recognition. This is also about
Oh, yeah.
some sort of benefit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
it'd be for benefit, maybe for the widows, because there's not many of us left alive. But, if the widows or the kids could get something, that'd be
right.
great. At least
Right.
show that you did honor what we did. Uh, well, we're, we thought we were Americans.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a gray area, isn't it? I mean, you weren't in the military. You were civilian, you were employees, you took jobs that you wanted to take. You weren't
That's right.
drafted. But, in terms of your contribution, the danger that you faced, the courage that it required, the
All the guys we rescued, for God's sakes.
yeah. Yeah, what about and I'm sure, I talk to a lot of veterans and, we always end up eventually talking about PTSD.
Mhm.
I would imagine that having seen the things that you've seen and done the things that you've done, um, you've probably had to process all that in some way.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the Agent Orange and the rest of it. In fact, the airplane I got shot down in, it used to stink from the stuff.
Wow. You ever have any
I
any
don't think
effects
so.
from that?
Everybody's got different physiology, and
Well, you grew
uh,
up spraying DDT in the kitchen, so you
that's
probably had built up a tolerance, right? Again,
could
everything
be.
everything is preparing you for Southeast Asia.
That's right.
So how do you I'm just curious after all these years, all these decades, what do you do now for your adrenaline fix?
Uh, Not a lot. I pretty
Yeah.
well got over that. Age is, of course, slows you down tremendously, and of course, uh, I'm not as physically active as what I used to be.
Hmm.
I got from the shoot down, I lost about an inch and a half in height due to a crushed vertebrae. And so every 3 months, I've got to go down to the VA and get an ablation, uh, an epidural. And
They'll treat you
uh,
at the VA?
pardon?
They will treat you at the VA?
Oh, yes, because I had Air Force time prior to all of this.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these guys have been super good to me. In fact, the one surgeon that does the epidural, he's got the book and all his kids have written it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a fan, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done magnificent things, particularly vision-wise. I've had cornea transplants and all the rest of that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
back to 2020, which is
Oh, wow.
great at my age.
Well, you're doing better
No
than I am.
glasses.
You're doing better than I am, and I'm 30 years younger than you are.
Okay.
Um,
Uh, Got out of Cambodia.
so what year is it now?
That is 1975.
Okay. So you get out of Cambodia, you go back to Laos.
That's right. Ran into Prince Panya in a bar, the royal family in Bangkok, and he had his Filipino accountant with him, and he asked me if I'd like to come back up and fly for him because Air America had left two C-46s there for him, and he was dropping rice and things like that with the C-46. And I went back up to Vientiane.
How did you know him? I mean,
From the social life in Vientiane, it's a small town,
got it. Okay.
nothing huge, and he was a party goer, and the royal family they were actually related to the Thai royal family, and he after the end of everything, he came down to Florida, and he had a couple condos down there that he owned, and made contact with him down there too.
Hmm.
But it's a
So he offered
small,
you a job and you thought,
yeah, made me
any
chief
any
pilot of
anything to
the
keep
vice.
Anything to keep from going home.
That's right. Uh, well, you after all of that, you never come home.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true.
You can't.
Hmm.
Uh, but I went up to Vientiane and started flying the C-46, dropping rice to actually sites that used to be enemy. And on the same ramp across the ramp was the old operations building, and the Russians had their operation there, and they had a Russian turboprop. They were doing the same thing. They couldn't do airdrops, but they could fly rice into the Plain de Jars, which used to be a enemy stronghold. And the bad part was for them, they'd scowl at me every time. I'd wave to them, and they wouldn't pay any attention. But I'd go up there. I could make 3 trips into the Plain de Jars with rice, twice as much rice than they had, and to their 2 trips, which their bureaucracy was slow, and just their loading was awful. But every time I'd land there, there was a Pathe Lao officer there with a red star on his cap, and he'd escort me over to a little tent on the side of the strip and serve me rice cakes and tea and give me a little bottle of Mekong whiskey every time, which if you wanted to peel paint, that was the stuff to use. And I did 3 bottles of that every day. But eventually, they started putting a guy in uniform with a red star on his cap and a pistol on his belt in the jump seat behind us. And I kind of knew this is going to be the beginning of the end. And so I bribed a border guard, crossed the Mekong River, caught the train down to Bangkok International overnight, got off there, and I'd been able to buy a 75% discount ticket one way from Bangkok to Anchorage, Alaska. And got out to the terminal and went through the bag passport and shot record check and boarded a Pan American 707, taxied out, and they wheeled out onto the runway and poured the coal to her. And we busted through a little low cloud deck and into the sunshine, and out the window. There's 243 guys out there that won't be going home. And what laid in the future in Anchorage, Alaska, I had no idea. The country I had not lived in for all these years. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Neil. I appreciate that. The uh, the time that you spent flying for the royal family in Laos, you said you were dropping rice and
Right.
provisions and things. Uh, for people who, myself included, who are not well versed on Laotian history, you said that something changed in terms of you had a guy with a red star on his cap who used to give you whiskey, and then suddenly you had a guy in your cockpit or in your cabin with a red star on his
Yep.
cap wearing a sidearm. Can you
Right.
provide some historical context there so we understand the significance of that change?
Well, they were going to probably keep me as I had the skills to resupply these guys. And what the future would hold, I had no idea. Whether it be constantly a guy with a pistol on his belt accompanying me everywhere. But the town had changed radically. There was no more bustle and everything in the atmosphere. The old watering holes of white rose and the purple porpoise and things like that, they were not there anymore. And one of the last evenings there, uh, down on the main drag and no dust in the air or anything else. And around the corner of the main drag, there was a little bar called a Saigon. And I went into that thing, and it's a little shotgun type bar, just very narrow. and there was a squawk in the back, and Mumbles, the gal from the White Rose, deaf mute, came running out there and grabbed me, and she was almost in tears. And I knew this is not going to be a joyful reunion. And luckily, she did end up with somebody from the embassy that
Got her out of there.
got her into the States.
Mhm. So what's happening is in Laos, the royal family is being
Yeah, well, the day after I escaped, Prince Panya swam across the Mekong River with $20 in his shorts.
got it. Yeah, the communists had taken over
Yeah,
in Laos. Yeah.
yeah.